Notre Dame fans are fired up about the quarterback competition, so let's talk about it. I'll give you my honest read on the battle as it stands today. Plus, we'll dive into some injury updates, new wrinkles on offense, and even my go-to tailgate plate. We have got a loaded mailbag today, and it starts right now.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the past 5 years. Today is Friday, August 8th, so happy Friday to you, and thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, it has been a very busy week on the show, and we have got even more great content coming your way today. I released a two-part interview with Tim Prister from Irish Illustrated, the longest tenured Notre Dame beat writer. In part one, which dropped on Wednesday, we broke down the 2025 team and the current state of the program under Marcus Freeman. Then in part two, which came out yesterday, we took a trip down memory lane to revisit some unforgettable highs and tough lows that Tim had a front row seat for. It was a lot of fun, so be sure to check those out once you're done here if you have not already. Now, as for today, we are diving into your questions in another Friday mailbag. It's been a while since we did the mailbag, so I'm excited to bring it back. And we're going to start with the latest on the Notre Dame quarterback battle. Media access has been pretty limited during camp, to say the least, but if you read between the lines, there is a fascinating trend that is starting to emerge. Then in segment two, we'll address some online discussion about injuries to running back Kedron Young and tight end Kevin Bauman. Then we'll talk through some intriguing schematic wrinkles on offense and debate which receiver is going to lead the team in 2025. And finally, we're going to close out the show with how Marcus Freeman's defensive roots still influence the program, plus a few fun ones about tailgate food and the unwritten rules of football. So here we go. Our first question comes from @TheViking1022. When it comes to the quarterback battle, there is obviously media bias and stories they push, but who is your horse in the race? Viking1022 says, personally, I'm a CJ Carr guy, but if Minchey wins and can win games and do it all, then I'm happy. Okay, just so we're all clear here, I do not have a horse in the race in the sense that I am rooting for one player in particular to win, because I'm not rooting for one guy to beat the other. I am just rooting for whoever is named the starting quarterback to be super successful at Notre Dame and win a bunch of football games starting this year. That being said, I have said for months now that I think CJ Carr is going to be the starting quarterback for Notre Dame in the season opener and beyond. And I am certainly not alone in that position. Tim Prister said this week on the show, he said he expects it to be Carr, along with his colleagues at Irish Illustrated, Tim O'Malley and John Bryce. Pete Sampson from The Athletic has been saying all offseason it's going to be CJ Carr. Same with his co-host, Matt Fortuna, and that's just the local media. We can expand that even further. I was listening to Josh Pate earlier this week talk about Notre Dame, and he talks about CJ Carr as if he was named the starter months ago and there isn't even a quarterback competition going on. Kirk Herbstreit from ESPN spoke at the Football Personnel and Recruiting Symposium in Nashville recently, and he had a quote, "There's something about this CJ Carr, I'm super high on him," when he was talking about Notre Dame. And back in January, I think it was literally one day after the national championship game when Notre Dame lost to Ohio State, Kirk went on Pat McAfee's show and said that CJ Carr is the type of guy you build a program around. He is just that good. So why is that? Why is it that all of these people, local and national media, assume and have assumed that it's going to be CJ Carr, even though we have barely seen him play at the collegiate level because he's only a redshirt freshman? I think there are two major reasons why. Number one, CJ Carr has looked extremely impressive in the limited opportunities when we have been able to see him. He balled out in the blue and gold game this past spring and the Jersey scrimmage as well. He also looked great in the spring game a year ago when he was still an early enrollee freshman, but he did have that bad practice in the first practice of camp, and considering that is the last thing we saw, I think a lot of people have that just sort of etched in their memories right now, and they're forgetting all the good stuff that he did back in this spring and beyond. But there's a second major reason here, okay? It's because everyone that I just mentioned, myself included, talked to people in and around the program, And the message throughout this offseason has been that CJ Carr is going to win the job. Kirk's comments after the national championship stand out to me especially. And I've talked about this story before on this show, so if you've heard it, I apologize. But when I was at ESPN in the playoff, the broadcasters would get significantly more time with the coaching staff than they normally would during the season. It's not just the head coach. I'm talking about the assistant coaches as well. It's because it is such a big broadcast with so many eyeballs on it. So I know that Kirk Herbstreit had more access to the Notre Dame coaching staff than he had at all prior to that season. So when you're talking to these coaches, and it's the head coach and the coordinator, and then a couple of days later, you come out and say that you think CJ Carr is the type of player that you build your program around and that it literally all revolves around him. Well, it's not like Kirk has really seen CJ Carr play that much. I mean, I'm sure he saw him sling it around in practice a little bit, but he was just coming back from an elbow injury that kept him out for the entire fall. So why do you think he's saying that? Who do you think is telling him that CJ Carr is going to be the guy? Do you see my point here? Like, there was always going to be a competition, as there should be, and there is right now. But CJ Carr was the overwhelming favorite to win from people on the outside and on the inside. That's not bias. That's just evaluating what you've seen with your two eyes and then also trusting people who see a lot more than we can. I think that's what a lot of people in the media have been doing. Now, are there some fans out there who are biased about this situation? Yes, absolutely. I see it. I know it. There's a lot of fans out there who have picked their guy and they will defend him to the death. I personally don't understand how you can be a fan of Notre Dame and yet actively root for one of these quarterbacks to fail, but that is a question for another time. I think that those people are in the minority. Most people are like you, Viking 1022, and you just want to see the best man win and then win some games at Notre Dame. I can only speak for myself when I say I'm not rooting for one guy or the other. If Kenny Minchey wins the job and he proves me wrong in the process, then great for him, man. That is an incredible story, and I will root for him like crazy. And sure, I'm probably going to take some shit for it if he does win the job, but I don't care. I've been wrong about stuff before. I will be wrong again, but I trusted what I saw in CJ Carr and what I heard to make an informed prediction that CJ Carr was going to win the job. And if that turns out to be wrong, so be it. But now the conversation has shifted a little bit, which leads me to my next question, which comes from @MattWerfel924, who says, Pete Sampson reported that according to his sources, the quarterback battle is 50-50 right now. Is it because Minchey has elevated his game, or is it because CJ Carr is performing poorer than we expected? So let's think about this for a second. We just spent an entire offseason hearing that CJ Carr was going to win the job, but after 1 week of practice in fall camp, it's now 50-50. Like, what could have possibly happened in that amount of time? Well, I think there's a couple of different things at play here, a couple of which Matt mentioned in his question. There's a chance that Kenny Minchey might have taken a big step forward this summer, and we're seeing it in camp, and that he's really just going out there and playing well. It's also possible that CJ Carr is not playing to the standard that they expected. Both of these things could be true, but I think it's a little bit more than that. The coaches are treating this like a true competition, which they should, and it's what they've said they would do this entire time. But if you say that the quarterback will be determined over the course of 1 to 2 weeks at the beginning of August, you have to stay true to that, or else the other guys on the team are going to look at you and not really trust what you have to say. Like, if CJ goes out there and he just does not play well at all in these first 2 weeks of camp, and yet they still give him the job while Minchey has been playing well, like, that is going to cause drastic effects that could affect the entire team. Like, we could be looking at another 2016 situation where the coaching staff just completely botched that quarterback competition between Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser, and it created a fractured locker room. I don't think that's the case here. I'm just saying that the coaches have to stick to their word. And right now, I don't think one guy has done enough to win the job outright. I think they've both done some good stuff, but they're both still growing in that role as well. So if it's dead even on the practice field, what tiebreakers could the coaching staff fall back on? Experience is one thing, even though these guys don't have much playing experience. Kenny Minchey has been around the program. He's been playing college football for one more year than CJ Carr. Not to mention, he didn't miss all of last fall, all of those reps like CJ Carr did because he was recovering from that injury. If we're talking versatility, we know that Kenny Minchey is a more dynamic runner and brings a different element to the game. But you could also make the counter that one of these guys has a higher ceiling, and myself and most other people believe that CJ Carr does have a higher ceiling, short and long term, than Kenny Minchey does because of his natural ability throwing the football. And also, how does the team respond to each individual player? Like I said, Minchey's been around 1 year longer. He's known the guys a little bit longer. The teammates seem to love him, but they also seem to love CJ Carr as well. So is this all to say that it's now Minchey's job to lose? No. If I had to pick who will win the starting quarterback job right here today, I still think it will be CJ Carr, although I will admit it is closer than I expected it would be going into camp. But my guess is that the Notre Dame coaching staff expected Carr to take the job and run with it by now, and he simply has not done that. And Minchey is doing enough to be right there in the mix, which leads me to my last question on the quarterbacks. This one comes from @PaulKinlan5496, who asks, if CJ Carr starts against Miami and Notre Dame is down by 2 touchdowns at halftime, does Kenny Minchey come in to start the second half? This is a good question, and for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to answer this as it pertains to both quarterbacks because I think it's the same. Whoever the Notre Dame coaching staff decides is going to be quarterback number 1 going out there in Miami is going to deal with intense scrutiny the moment they start playing poorly. Like if CJ Carr wins the job in camp and he struggles early in that game against Miami, fans are going to be calling for Kenny Minchey. If Kenny Minchey wins the job and he struggles, fans are going to call for CJ Carr. That's how it always is. But even more so in a situation like this, when there are 2 quarterbacks competing and they appear to be very similar in their skill set as we sit here today. It all presents a bigger problem for the coaching staff. How much are they going to be willing to roll with the guy that they choose in practice? Because Pete Sampson pointed out in his article this week that Mike Denbrock actually benched his starting quarterback in the first half of their season opener in 2018 when he was at Cincinnati for a guy by the name of Desmond Ridder when he was only a redshirt freshman. I'm sure that was not the plan going into that game, but it does show that Denbrock has a willingness to make a change early on if things are not going to plan. So you think back to last year. Notre Dame fans wanted Riley Leonard to be benched for Steve Angeli after the loss at Northern Illinois, and even after the game against Purdue. And there wasn't even a true competition at the time, right? Like it was always going to be Riley Leonard. So at this point, there is hardly any certainty in this quarterback situation. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. And we have to trust the staff to get it right because we aren't seeing what they see in practice, in meetings, in the film room, all of that. And I understand why some fans are going to hear this and they're going to be concerned that neither guy has stepped up enough to win the job. But I would counter that by saying it's still very early on, and you're dealing with 2 quarterbacks who have never started a game or really even played any meaningful football at the collegiate level. These quarterbacks are going up against one of the best defenses in the country every single day in practice, and defenses always start out ahead. So it should not be a shock that they're struggling a little bit and they haven't been able to seize this position like we all had hoped one would. Whoever wins, the coaches are going to have a plan for them, and there are enough playmakers around them to have success early on, and they're going to have to grow into the position as the season goes along. It happens all the time in all levels of college football. Ohio State, as a matter of fact, is in a very similar position right now with redshirt freshman Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz, a redshirt sophomore. It's very similar to what Notre Dame is dealing with right now because Sayin is the 5-star redshirt freshman who everyone expected would win the job, and then you got Lincoln Kienholz, who doesn't have quite the same recruiting profile that Sayin does, but he's a little bit older, a little bit more savvy veteran who might win that job as well. So the important thing here is that Notre Dame, like Ohio State, has the luxury of picking between 2 very talented quarterbacks to be their starting quarterback. That has not always been the case at Notre Dame, right? I think we all know what years where that quarterback position was not up to snuff. But this year, they have 2 very talented prospects. It is a very heated battle. I expect this to go on 1 more week. I would expect a hardline date of August 17th, which is exactly 2 weeks away from the season opener against Miami. If Notre Dame does not announce a starting quarterback by that date, then we might have a problem. But as we sit here today, I don't think it's a problem. I just think it's 2 really talented quarterbacks going at it in practice. All right, we have now covered the quarterback situation, but the offense has a lot more going on than just that. From injuries to key reserves to schematic wrinkles and breakout receiver predictions, we have got a lot more to discuss on today's mailbag that's coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. All right, Let's give a baseball pick on the show today. So I was looking at some of the odds on FanDuel. Obviously, the Dodgers, heavy favorites to win the National League and win the World Series. But considering the way that the Phillies went all in on the trade deadline and the fact that their window is closing soon, I think that they're going to give everything into winning the World Series this season. I hope for Bryce Harper's sake that he does get a ring. So you know what? My pick here, I'm going Phillies plus 400 to win the National League. I'm not ready to crown them as the World Series champ just yet, but I think that's pretty good value for a very good baseball team. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, this next question is a bit of a bummer, but it comes from at MGMarino36. I have seen on message boards that Keidron Young and Kevin Bauman are both injured, potentially for an extended period of time. Do you think they are just message board rumors or something real? Okay, so normally it is not my place to report on injuries before they get officially announced. And at the time of this recording, there have been no official announcements. It's possible by the time that you're watching or listening to this, there might be an official word on these injuries. But I do feel like enough people have heard about it and reported on it that I feel comfortable saying the rumors are legit. Both players, Keidron Young and Kevin Bauman, have suffered injuries that will require them to miss an extended period of time. I am gutted for both of these guys, but especially Kevin Bauman. I believe this is his potentially third knee injury, plus he had a broken leg as well. So I'm just not sure how much more football his body can take. It is just so unfortunate for him because when he was coming out of high school, he wasn't a huge prospect, but the Notre Dame staff was really high on him, and he actually came in at the same time as Michael Mayer, and they were advertised as a legitimate 1-2 punch. Like, Michael Mayer was the 5-star. He was going to be the next great tight end, and that turned out to be true. But Kevin Bauman was right there with him, and the Notre Dame coaching staff thought that both those guys could create a just hell of a tandem at the tight end position. But Kevin Bauman's entire career has just been snake bitten. It's just been one injury after the next, and it's just so unfortunate for him because he was probably tight end number 3 on the depth chart going into this year. Like, he had a real role carved out for him for this season. He made that really nice catch in the spring game. So I felt like he was going to be an asset for this offense. And even worse, he just spoke about how excited he was to be able to play against his younger brother who plays for the Miami Hurricanes in the season opener, and he's not even going to be able to get that opportunity to share the field with his younger brother. So it is just an incredibly awful situation for Kevin Bauman. He made the decision to come back to Notre Dame and play one more year, probably because he knew that he would have a good chance to see the field, be a part of a team who we all expect to make it back to the college football playoff and make a run at it. So the fact that he suffers yet another, what we believe to be serious injury, is just incredibly disheartening and is just one of those cold realities of the game of football that we all love. So hoping for the best for him. I don't know what his future holds, but just really praying for the young man. Now, as for Notre Dame's tight end room, we got to talk about it. It was already thin going into camp because Cooper Flanagan is going to miss this entire season as he recovers from a ruptured Achilles that he suffered in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. So now you've got Eli Raridan, who has an injury history, Ty Washington, the transfer from Arkansas, who we think is good, but we haven't really seen it in a Notre Dame uniform yet. Now they lose Kevin Bauman, so you're looking at Jack Larson, who's a redshirt freshman, and James Flanagan, who's a true freshman. Like, I don't feel great about the depth in the tight end room right now, and it's probably the only position on the roster that I can say that about. So the fact that this injury happened to that position is critical, and Notre Dame is going to have to figure out a way to keep those guys healthy because one more injury at that position and we could be in a serious problem. It's the opposite situation at running back, but it is still very unfortunate that Keidron Young did potentially suffer what we believe to be a serious injury. That's a tough blow for him because I do think he was going to play this year. Probably not a ton unless more injuries happen in front of him, but running back coach Jaywan Sider said it this week. He's got what it takes to be a big-time player at this level. He had a great spring, a great fall camp up to this point. He's built like a brick wall at 240 pounds, and he can move well. So I think they were considering using him as the big back in short yardage situations. Now, I don't think he's going to get that chance, but Notre Dame is just fine at running back for this season. They still have 3 guys who are named to the Doak Walker Award preseason watch list for the best running back in the country. Think about that for a second. There are 3 guys on Notre Dame's roster who might be the best running back in the country. I think we all believe that that player who has a real chance of winning that award is Jeremiah Love, but that shows you the depth in that room. Plus, they have Javon Payne back, a player who is often forgotten about. I've even done it on this show back in the spring. I'll admit I did a pre-spring depth chart. Totally forgot Jabron Payne. It was a bad omission on my part. He was a contributor to the team in 2023, missed all of last season with an injury, but now he's running back number 4 behind Love, Price, and Williams. So that is such a great luxury to have, that your 4th running back after one of your better players went down is someone like Jabron Payne, who has already played. He scored a touchdown in that game against Ohio State in 2023. So short term, Notre Dame is just fine at running back. Long term, I just hope that whatever Young is dealing with won't prevent him from having a big season in 2026, because I fully expect Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price to be gone after this year, which means that it's going to be Williams' turn and Young's turn to be the 2 leading backs next season. And some injuries take longer to recover from than others, so I just hope that Young can get back on the field fully healthy by next year so he can finally take off and be that player that we all expect him to be. All right, next up, at Michael Lucero 5730. The offense has shown some 21 personnel, which is 2 running backs on the field at once during practice. So 2 questions. 1, why reveal that in limited media sessions? And 2, what is your take on how effective it could be? As for showing it in media sessions, they have shown 2 back sets in pretty much every preseason camp that I can remember. So that doesn't mean, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to run it a bunch in games. This has actually been a preseason talking point a lot in recent years because Notre Dame has had such a great stretch of running backs. Like I remember back in 2022 when Notre Dame had Estimate and Diggs and not a whole lot to work with at wide receiver, then there were real conversations about, well, why doesn't Notre Dame just run 2 running back sets at once? And they did a little bit, but I don't expect Miami to like all of a sudden change their defensive game plan because they saw and read in some practice reports that Notre Dame had 2 of the very best running backs in the country on the field at the same time. Like, they should do that. I'm sure Miami was already preparing for that to begin with. However, even though it has been a talking point during previous preseason camps, I do think that they will use more 2 running back sets this season than they ever have in the past. 1, because they're thin at tight end, so it's a way to get the tight end off the field. And also, the more important thing here is Jeremiah Love has been getting a lot more work catching passes, not just out of the backfield. They'll motion him out to the slot and he'll run routes downfield. I mean, imagine being an outside linebacker trying to keep up with Jeremiah Love in coverage. Probably not a great situation for that guy to be in, and as long as Jeremiah Love has the route running technique and the hands to reel in the catch, then that could be a great asset for this Notre Dame offense. Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily actually did a great breakdown on this. Notre Dame ran a lot of 21 personnel against Ohio State in 2023, kind of came out of nowhere, very effective in that game. They also did it quite a bit in 2021 when Tommy Rees was the offensive coordinator, but they would usually run it when Tyler Buckner would come in for Jack Cohn. He'd have those RPO packages, and they would run it a lot more, and it just kind of present something else for the defense to try to deal with because Jack Cohn couldn't move at all in the pocket, and then you bring in a guy like Tyler Buckner, and they're running RPO to the outside. It's just like a complete change of pace to have to deal with. So for this year, with Love and Price and Mike Denbrock as the play caller, I think it could be extremely effective because we know those guys are super talented. And also, Mike Denbrock is so good. He's so good at using motion to create matchups in the pass and the run game. Plus, whoever wins the job, CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, they're going to be able to run RPO. So it's going to be a great asset. And if you have 2 weapons in the backfield that are as good as Love and Price are, and you can get them into a favorable matchup, then why not run it all the time? So I am very excited to see what they could do with 2 running backs on the field at once, but I'm not worried about them showcasing it in limited media availability. All right, next up, we got a question from @yo_teach_IRL. Not really sure what that means. I've always wondered that because this guy has actually submitted a few mailbag questions. Shout out to you. Thank you for watching or listening. They ask, who will be the first wide receiver to get 4 touchdown catches in 2025? For context, Jaden Greathouse had 4 all of last season, 3 in the college football playoff, and that led the team. First of all, let me just say, the fact that 4 touchdown receptions led the team last year is pretty sad. I actually mentioned this on Tuesday's show. Back in 2006, Jeff Samardzija had 12 touchdown receptions, and he did not lead the team that year. That would be Rima McKnight, who had 15 touchdowns. So 27 touchdown receptions between 2 players. It's been a long time since that happened at Notre Dame. But this year, for who will lead the team in receiving touchdowns, I am taking Malachi Fields. I think he will get to, 4? Yeah, 4 before everyone else. So the buzz around Fields in camp has been really exciting. Like, Bo Collins had some buzz in camp last year, but not like this. The buzz around Bo Collins was more so because he was extremely athletic, like testing wise, he was great. He was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks List last year, but now Fields comes in and he is the type of game changer that Notre Dame has desperately needed at wide receiver. Like, he's not just a good athlete. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's more reliable. He's produced more than Bo Collins at the college level already. Although he only had 5 touchdowns in each of the last 2 years, I think he's going to get a lot more this season because, one, he's not going to be getting all the attention like he did when he was at Virginia. But now when Notre Dame is in the red zone, Fields could be a matchup nightmare for defenses in like a safety net for the young quarterback who steps in, because teams are going to be so worried about the run game with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Plus, Jaden Greathouse has been someone that teams know to watch out for now. Eli Raridan is another guy at tight end that teams are going to have to take into account. So Fields is probably going to find himself in some favorable matchups, and Notre Dame hasn't had a red zone target at the wide receiver position like that in years. So Greathouse could end up with more catches and maybe more receiving yards, but in terms of touchdowns, I expect it to be Malachi Fields this season. All right, we still got a few more questions to go. So coming up next, we're going to talk about how Marcus Freeman's defensive mindset still influences his coaching staff, plus the unwritten rules of football and my go-to game day feast. That's next. Okay, one of my favorite usernames ever submitted a question at BLessWrong422. Does Marcus Freeman's experience as a defensive coordinator influence his hiring of coaches? Also, are you going to a game this year? I'll answer that one first. Yes, I'm going to the USC game for sure. Got tickets. That trip is locked in. Potentially going to the Texas A&M game as well. I would like to be able to get to more home games this year, but it's not easy for me to get to South Bend because I live in LA, and honestly, getting to South Bend is really difficult to fly into because the flights into South Bend are super expensive. Like, even in the summer when there's not football, they're still outrageously expensive. So you got to fly to Chicago and then get a ride from there to South Bend. So kind of a major pain there. I'd like to get to more this season. Hopefully going to get to more than just the USC game, but we can lock that one in today. Now, as for the question about Marcus Freeman, yes and no, because even though he has a defensive background and that influences how he's coaching, right? Like, I fully expect Marcus Freeman is more involved in defensive game planning than offense, even though he's definitely involved in what the offense is doing. He just has probably more input into what the defense does because he's been a defensive coordinator before, All-American linebacker, all that stuff. But in terms of how he hires his staff, it's pretty similar, offense and defense. Like, he's shown that he wants older, experienced coordinators, but he also has a bunch of younger position coaches. He didn't hire a young defensive coordinator when he took the job because he wanted to oversee that side of the ball. Like, he didn't want someone he could control. He wanted an experienced guy who has been a coordinator, has been a head coach, who went out and he got Al Golden, who was a former head coach, who could also help Marcus Freeman grow into the role as he was learning how to be a head coach himself. It's actually funny to think back to when that was happening, or actually before Al Golden was hired. Freeman was asked about what he was looking for in a defensive coordinator, and he said, somewhat infamously, whoever they hire was going to run Notre Dame's defense. Well, that turned out to not really be true. And I understand why he said it. It's because Notre Dame was going through a period where they're going to have 3 different defensive coordinators in 3 years because they had Clark Lee in his last year. Then it was Marcus Freeman for 1 year, and then they were going to have a new defensive coordinator. So I think Freeman was really just looking out for his players because that's a lot of change. It's a lot of new terminology, new scheme to have to deal with. But then Al Golden came in. Marcus Freeman let him cook a little bit, and then he ended up becoming the best assistant coach in all of college football. So it worked out with Al Golden, to say the least. I would expect that on the offensive side of the ball, what Freeman has in Mike Denbrock is exactly what he wanted. Because when he first became head coach, he probably wanted to keep Tommy Rees and all the assistant coaches for the sake of continuity. That was supposed to be a big part of the Marcus Freeman promotion into becoming a head coach, was that the rest of the staff was going to stay the same, although that didn't really end up working out that way. But they were basically a package deal. And Tommy Rees was going to be the head coach of the offense, and Marcus Freeman was going to handle everything else. Well, Tommy Rees left for Alabama. Then Marcus Freeman tried to go out and got the Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator at Utah. Almost forgot his name. What a saga that was, right? And Andy Ludwig had been around for a long time, had plenty of experience, and it didn't get done. And then ultimately Freeman ended up with Jared Parker, who is not his first, second, or third choice. So I don't really count that as like what he was looking for, what he wanted to do. It was just like they needed an offensive coordinator, someone who he was familiar with. Well, once he left for the job at Troy, went out, got Mike Denbrock, someone who's been around, someone who Marcus Freeman knows he can trust and has seen it all on the offensive side of the ball. So I think what he has now with a guy like Mike Denbrock leading the offense and Chris Ash, an experienced guy leading the defense, is exactly what he wants, so that they can kind of lead their respective sides of the ball, and Marcus Freeman can sort of handle the million other things he needs to deal with as the head coach. I will say that the fact that Freeman has had such a high hit rate when it comes to hiring coaches, we talked about this earlier this week with Tim Priester, it is the most impressive aspect, or most impressive skill set, I should say, because, making the national championship in your third year is pretty impressive as well. It is just so rare for a coach to be this good at hiring, especially a young first-time head coach. Although he hasn't really had to hire that many people, Notre Dame has been pretty good at retaining the staff. Marcus Freeman hired Al Washington when he first got the job. He's still around. Max Bulla was an internal hire, was a GA, and then got promoted to linebackers coach after Chris O'Leary left, and they had a full-time staff job opened up. Mike Mickens was a Brian Kelly hire on offense. He's had to hire 2 different offensive coordinators now, 2 different wide receiver coaches, and also 2 different running back coaches. So he's had to hire a lot more so on the offensive side of the ball, but I think we've seen what he likes. He likes experience. He talks about it all the time. And the fact that so many people, so many great coaches want to work for him is a testament to who Marcus Freeman is, because the fact he's this young and these really high caliber coaches like a J1 Sider want to work for him just shows a lot about the type of person that Marcus Freeman is. Okay, got a couple more fun ones to wrap it up. At History Sensei, there's often talk of the unwritten rules in baseball. Are there any unwritten rules in football? They might not be referred to as unwritten rules, but there definitely are. I think the one that stands out the most is never try to injure another player. That's just not cool to do at all. Even though football is a very violent game and you're trying to hurt the opponent, you're trying to let them feel you, especially if you're on defense. You want whoever is carrying the ball to feel you every single time you tackle them. You're not trying to break their leg or anything like that. Maybe back in the olden days that's how it worked, or maybe if you're on the New Orleans Saints and Greg Williams is your defensive coordinator and you're handing out bounties in the locker room, maybe it was a different time back then, but I think now it's just really uncalled for when guys if they try to twist an ankle at the bottom of the pile or something like that, that is definitely uncalled for. People do not react kindly to that. And some people think that you shouldn't run the score up late in the game. There are a lot of variables in this situation though. If you're passing downfield with under a minute to go and you're up by 30, yeah, people are probably going to get pretty pissed off if you do that. But if you're up 35 and it's the start of the fourth quarter and you've got all your backups in and you're running the ball and they can't stop you, there's nothing you can do, right? You're not just going to start kneeling it out with 13 minutes left in the game. So that's not as much of an unwritten rule as it is. It's just kind of dependent on the circumstances in the game. I also think that some people will react weird if you run the ball with, if it's the last possession, you're just running out the clock, right? Some people don't like it when you run the ball as opposed to taking a knee. I don't really get that. Some people can get weird about it though. But one thing that is universal in football, all levels, do not disrespect the home team's field, logo, anything like that. This is a big no-no, and whenever a road team does it, that leads to a fight in the pregame, some sort of scuffle on the field. Maybe it carries over into the game, but that's a big no-no, right? Do not disrespect the logo. Don't disrespect their home field. And lastly, I would say that jumping on a pile is generally looked down upon because it sucks for both teams, okay? You don't want to be the guy, and it actually happens a lot more in youth football. It's pretty funny when you have one kid who just jumps on a pile for no reason other than they want to get in the mix a little bit. But if you tackle a player, right, and there's a bit of a pile, and your own teammate jumps on you from the top, that sucks for everyone, teammates included, right? So just don't do that. It's also kind of stupid, unless you're trying to get a fumble or something like that. All right, last one here. At Optimus Provost, what's your ideal game day / tailgate menu? I'm very simple. I love buffalo wings. I love hot wings. I love steak, potatoes, and asparagus is my death row meal. But if we're talking tailgate or a football game day, wings are my go-to. Wings are probably my second favorite food, period. The problem with wings, the variance can be really high. Some wings are awesome, right? I could eat 30. Then there are some that are just awful, like the wings at Brothers in South Bend on Wednesday night wing night. Those can barely be described as chicken wings. So that is the one downside. But if you get some real good wings with good sauce and the ratio is just right, there's nothing better, especially when you got a bunch of football to watch. So that would honestly be my main course. I would just say hot wings, celery and ranch on the side, and then you got some French fries as well. I'm pretty simple. I know some people prefer pizza. I like pizza. Maybe dips like buffalo chicken dip or something like that. But I like hot wings and some ice cold Miller Lite to wash it down on game day. That is more of a home tailgate though. If we're talking like a true game day, I'm going to be outside for hours and hours. It's pretty hard to bring wings and then keep them warm and fresh all day. Like, the variance with wings, it's not great. So it's hard to keep them warm. So other great game day tailgate options, Italian beef sandwiches. Those are really good too. That's more of like a Midwest thing, especially if people get like the Portillo's on the go package. Those are awesome. Hot dogs, staple, obviously. Pulled pork sandwiches are also very good as well. So all of these food items are great, but I will say, it's all making me a little bit hungry, and I need to eat dinner. So I'm going to wrap it up here. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thank you again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before you head out, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow on your preferred podcast app and leave a rating and review. Quick programming note. Monday's episode is actually going to be coming out tomorrow on Saturday afternoon, so I can react immediately to Elijah Golden's commitment announcement. He has been one of Notre Dame's top targets from the very start of this recruiting cycle, and he is the final piece to complete a very special 2026 recruiting class. Golden is set to announce at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and I'm going to be live shortly after to break it all down. Then we will return to our normal schedule on Tuesday of next week. So have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Saturday.